Yo, what's happening, everybody? My name is Anthony Correnti, and thank you, as always, for checking out another episode of the Dynasty Drive. I appreciate all the support, as always. Going to keep the intro really short today. Have a good conversation with somebody I'm a pretty big fan of myself, Skip Newton, part of the Devy team over at NFL Draft Bible, co-host of the Devy Happy Hour. So me and Skip had a conversation with some tips and some thoughts for people considering getting into Devy for the first time or playing Devy for the first time around this season. So probably runs for about 30 minutes, 35 minutes or so. We're going to get right into it. So I appreciate Skip for joining me, and then we'll see you guys on the other side. Thanks. All right. Well, joining me on today's podcast is Skip Newton, co-host of the Devy Happy Hour and part of the Devy team over at NFL Draft Bible. So, Skip, I appreciate you taking the time to hop on with me and talk Devy. We're in your world
thanks
now.
Thanks a lot, Anthony. It's awesome to be here. Yeah, we got all the audio kinks worked out. A little weird Zoom thing, but it's all good.
No, I appreciate it. And we were just saying privately, I think it's kind of a good place to pick up that I think that Devy is really kind of where Dynasty was a couple of years ago, where it feels like Devy's about to be that next big thing. And it feels kind of like a logical progression where, you know, people played redraft forever and it's like, all right, how do I get more? And it's like, oh, Dynasty. And then people play that forever and now it's like, well, how do I get more? And enter Devy.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you start getting into some of these leagues that people come up with where they have all sorts of different, you know, rules, and it forces you to do different strategies. And I was telling Matt on one of our podcasts, you know, right after New Year's, I've got a kind of a New Year's resolution of, okay, no new leagues. I can't do it. I've got like 20 leagues. And every time I see a tweet out from like Scott Fish with a couple of great orphans, or John Bosch has got a new league coming, I'm just like, do not click on those links. Do not click on those links.
I said it was, I forget if it was like right before New Year's. I was on with the guys who do Dynasty Underdog, and I was like, yeah, I probably won't add like too much, you know, this year. And I think since then I've taken over an orphan. I just did a Dynasty startup like a week ago. And I was like, oh God, here I am drafting Jacob Eason in like the 23rd round of a Dynasty startup.
Yeah. Well, my theory is I got into a bunch of campus to Canton leagues, you know, last year for the first time, and you know, Shaq talked me into one, and then all of a sudden it's like the floodgates open. It's like, oh, if I'm going to do one, I'm going to do a few, and of course we nobody did the college side. I mean, we had our players, but there was no games, no points. It was just, you know, kind of like a really huge Devy team for a year because the college season was all messed up.
Yeah,
and I got to remind myself of that. It's like, okay, when you start this year, those 5, campus to Canton leagues, those are going to feel like new leagues because now you got to manage rosters, you got to set lineups,
sure.
And it's pretty challenging on the college side with the bye weeks and bigger rosters. So I'm going to let that be my new leagues.
Yeah, I have not dipped my toe all the way into the campus to Canton water yet. Maybe that's what I'll add. After
there you go. I do highly recommend it. I mean, even the first one, you know, Shaq was really pushing, and I was like, man, I'm not at this level yet. I mean, I'm just really feeling good about Devy, and now you're going to make me go 45 rounds of college. Like, this is insane, dude. I'm going to feel good until about round 10, and then I'm going to be, what happens now? Well, then, you know, I told myself, you're going to be bad, but you will use this as a way to learn and get better, and because it'll force you to just look at, you know, so many more players, and it'll help you in the long run.
I think that's like a good point though about like even the correlation between Devy and Dynasty is it's like you see like a new Dynasty player every year who is like swimming in it when it gets to rookie draft season. And then, you know, that same guy or girl, like 2 or 3 years later, you know, knows everybody inside and out who's going in the 4th or 5th round of these rookie drafts. And it's like, you come play some Devy. Like that's.
Yep, exactly. Well, and then I get into this league, and it's, you know, besides, you know, Brian Chicochis, you've got Ray Garvin, you know, Matt Hicks, Travis May. It's like, okay, these are all like Devy heavy hitters. What? geez, if I talk about a league of sharks, I'm screwed.
Well, that's awesome, man. It is. It's an awesome format. I think that it's a logical progression for people that have, had their appetite, wet from Dynasty and looking for more. Something you're always looking for more. Us as fantasy players, I think you're always just looking for more. So before we get into some tips that you might have or I might have for people that are playing the format the first time, if anybody's not already, where can they follow or see any of your work, whether it's podcasts, written work, Twitter, all that good stuff?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm the co-host of the Devy Happy Hour with Matthew Jackson and Brian Shikochis when he could make it, but his teaching job with the hybrid is just absolutely killing him. So he hasn't been on for a while. So hopefully later this year he can get back into the groove. And then I'm on Twitter at Skip Newton 31. And like you mentioned, we're on the Devy team for the NFL Draft Bible. So I focus on the ACC and. I loved the fact that I decided to get into that, back in July when I was approached by Zach, and who knew where that was going at the time. I'm just like, wow, this is absolutely crazy and exciting. So it's fun to be surrounded by, all these guys that just know so much about the draft and all the players and the process and all that. And then to be a part of the great Devy team, it's like, man, they're, again, more opportunity to learn. And that's what I'm here for.
Yeah. I said to somebody just recently that the thing that I love, and not to, just both of us sit here and, pound our chests about the awesome people over there. But the thing that I think is awesome about where it's ended up is like, there's literally somebody for everything. Like you want somebody who's a really strong draft guy, NFL Draft Bible's got it. You want somebody who's really great at Dynasty, Devy, like there's literally something for everybody. That's kind of incredible. And like you said, I think it was back in like October or something like that I initially, chatted with Zach through DMs. And like you said, I never in a million years would have guessed it was going where it has since gone. But it is awesome and really great stuff coming already over there, and obviously in the future as well. So exciting times for sure.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, well, let's get into it. First and foremost, like, baseline number one, somebody comes to you and says, Skip, I want to get into playing Devy for the first time. Like, what's like the easy off the cuff, like first tip you're giving them? Like, here's what you need to know for sure before you start doing anything.
That's a great question. I think, I think back to when I started, and I really utilized, the online resources to kind of get an idea of, what players are more valuable, based on the league settings, and, start following people on Twitter that know what they're doing, and, just kind of get an idea of, who do people like. And, if you're a big fan of college football and you play a lot, then I think it comes natural because you're probably more familiar with those names. But if you're not, then, I think that'll just get you into college football. It's like all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm going to start paying attention to these guys that I need to be looking at. And I think that would be my first advice is, don't just, you can, if you want to just wing it, but I think at least find a credible resource, like NFL Draft Bible, or if you got another site that has rankings, it at least can be a helpful guide to give you kind of the names that you want to look at before you just dive, head first in that first Devy draft.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue, especially when, if it's a fresh league and, just starting up or kicking off or anything like that. If it's a league, I guess first and foremost, if it's a league without a separate, Devy draft and college players are available in that first startup draft, how do you balance, or how would you balance, valuing a current professional player versus, say, like, the really high-end Devy prospects, whether that be, the guys that are coming out current rookie year, or guys a year out like Breece Hall, or some of these guys even a little bit further down the road?
Man, I always tell people you gotta be really careful with overvaluing some of these Devy guys, because the odds of, like if you're a dynasty player and the odds of hitting on a rookie, that guys are going to go in the first round or the second or third round, and they're going to bust, and they're not going to become good fantasy players on your roster. I mean, they might be good NFL players, but it just doesn't pan out. Well, those percentages of hitting are going to go down even more the farther away these players get get from college or from the pros. And you have to keep that in mind. I mean, you don't want to pass on, like a wide receiver like Tyler Boyd because you really love Amon-Ra St. Brown, or for example, I mean, it's like, wait a minute, Tyler Boyd's already proven that he's going to put up at least wide receiver 2 stats in the NFL. Sure. And it's not like he's 30 years old. So, I think you gotta be really careful at how high you value them. And then, the other part of it is, and I've actually never been in a startup where the Devy players were actually included in the startup. I've seen it where, like on a startup that wasn't Devy, where they had the rookie picks in there. So you could, you can get to the 3rd round and I say, okay, I'm going to draft the 101, but you're not locking into the player. So that would be interesting because I think, as you prepare for your startup draft, you obviously have to know, okay, what are my league settings? Is it a super flex? Is it 2 tight end? Is it tight end premium, PPR, whatever, right? And then kind of come up with a strategy and decide, how do you want to construct your roster? And then that'll help you with, with those young Devy players, knowing that, okay, you're going to have to hold on them, but, maybe you didn't get the NFL guys you wanted at certain positions. So you're like, okay, I'm going to start, kind of hitting those positions, at least on the college side. So I know in a couple of years, I'm going to start to replenish my talent. But, what I always tell people too is, I get a strategy going into a startup, and then I have to remind myself, be flexible.
Oh yeah. Have to.
You don't know what the other guys are going to do. And all of a sudden, if they start doing things crazy, you're just like, all right, I need to pivot here and just think on the fly and do something else. So yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's hard to nail down like what round do you take a player. I mean, obviously, if none of them have been taken, and maybe you grabbed a quarterback early and you're like, all right, I'm gonna take a chance and just go Trevor Lawrence. I mean, I think the advice I would have on those kinds of players, like when they're coming in as rookies, is come up with a rookie ranking, or a dynasty ranking, and put the rookies in there.
Yeah.
Where would you take Trevor Lawrence compared to Joe Burrow and Dak Prescott and these other guys? It's, and then just slot them in as if they're already in the league and hope for the best.
Kind of crazy, and it wasn't a Devy startup that I did, but like I just said a couple minutes ago, I just finished that. It was a startup, like a slow draft it was started like 2 or 3 weeks ago. And like you had said, the rookie picks were in the draft pool. So you could draft the 101, it was super flex. So presumably Trevor Lawrence, and Trevor Lawrence, or the pick that will turn into Trevor Lawrence, went higher than all of those guys. And it's like higher than Dak, higher than Burrow, higher than the 101 pick went in round 1 of the startup. Yeah. And perfect example of like, be flexible, adapt to strategy, because I am still like guilty of, even in Superflex, as much as Superflex has become like the new norm, Superflex is the new black. But I still try every time to be like, I'm going to hold out a little bit on quarterbacks. Like, I don't want to be part of this early run. And then legitimately, like of the 12 first round picks, I think like 9 or 10 of them were quarterbacks. Like the quarterback run went so fast that I was like, oh man, well, this is bad. Like I don't even want to be taking one right now. But yeah, you sometimes got to play into what everybody else does. You don't know, especially if it's a league that isn't like a home league, where you don't know people's, or haven't been playing with people for, years and years and years, and don't know their tendencies, that something like that goes totally haywire and throws everything off. But I think it's a good point that in Devy and Dynasty, both people really tend to get hung up on age in a big way, and passing up on a proven commodity for somebody because it's like, well, he's in college or he's young and, he'll be good forever. It's like, you see, like you said, players that don't pan out all the time. Like, remember whatever it was 2 years ago when N'Keal Harry was the 101 in a lot of rookie drafts, or like the 102 or the 103. Right. And not that I'm not out on N'Keal Harry. I'm still trying to like buy low because I think there's a chance, but I mean, you're certainly not happy if you spent a top 3 rookie pick on him that year. And I think that's a good point to remember, that, as good as a player might be in, sometimes through his whole college career, sometimes it doesn't work when he gets to the pros, like
right.
Trent Richardson.
Yeah. Or you've got more chances for injury, or, I had made a trade last season, in the the offseason that I felt really good about. And I've talked about this on the other show where, I had Ronald Jones, and, he's all right. And he had that range of outcomes where, okay, he might get better and you prove all the Ronald Jones fans correct and that he's a good player, or he might just kind of keep being this meh running back that you can't ever rely on. And I traded him straight up for Journey Brown. And I walked away from that feeling like oh
happy.
Man, this is going to be so awesome.
Yeah.
Because I loved Journey Brown. I've got him in, had him in 2 other leagues too. And I felt good about it. And then, he had the medical condition where he had to quit. And it's like, that was a tough one to swallow on that. So
that was such a bummer because he was such an exciting player and like somebody that I agree. If I made that trade at that time, I would have felt great about trading Ronald Jones for Journey Brown because I thought the future was bright. And it was like, if I'm remembering right, like totally out of left field too, like not a medical checkup, like not even for anything pertaining to what it ended up being, right? It was like COVID related or just like another medical checkup. And they were like, whoa, pump the brakes. It's, you're done. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think
sports
you're right.
are crazy.
It might have been that situation where they were doing COVID testing or something.
Yeah.
And because of that, they found this, which, you look back at it like, wow, thank God they did. Because this could have really gone horribly wrong. I mean, at least he's healthy and alive and he can find something else to do with his life.
Yeah, I guess. And as, Journey Brown's a good segue into some running backs, but just the prospect of valuing running backs versus wide receivers. Like I say all the time in Dynasty, like I want my roster built around wide receivers just because I feel better about the odds of being able to draft a rookie running back or, plug in a running back eventually. But I feel good about having a roster filled out with long-term, young, good wide receivers. Like if I can build out that roster with 2 or 3, like really solid young wide receivers with, bright careers ahead of them, I feel more comfortable with my odds of just based on the shorter shelf life of, a running back. But I do think it's interesting. Like, I guess valuing a running back coming out, like say not this year, not these guys, the Breece Halls and the guys further down the road, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, whoever, but, valuing them versus like the high end wide receiver talent. Do you feel more confident in one hitting more often than the other? Because I feel like the amount of wide receivers that exists on just a year-to-year basis now, it seems like it gets deeper every single year, where I just feel like the odds have to be better on hitting on wide receivers at this point than they do on hitting on running backs.
Yeah, there's a bigger pool. I mean, I think like I've said for, a few months that the running back pool is pretty deep this year. It's just not high end, like the top level deep like it was. I mean, last year was ridiculous, right?
Yeah,
you had
silly.
A top 5 that was so good, and then a second tier of guys that are, some of them are already gonna pan out, and then of course the undrafted king and James Robinson. But
yeah,
we did a study last year, kind of we were reviewing the freshman class and breaking it down by position, and so I went through like years in the past. I went back to basically far enough where, okay, these guys are all rookies now. And then went back like another 5 years and just basically said, okay, who are the top 10, 247 sport ranked players at each position, and just listed them out and said, okay, here's how those top 10 guys panned out. Are these names that you even know? And it was amazing how, generally speaking, the running backs had a better hit rate.
Really?
And then the wide receivers, and then the quarterbacks, and the tight ends were an absolute train wreck. It was you barely could. I mean, and I even went like 20 deep just to try and, okay, maybe I can find another guy, and it was really thin. And the takeaway I had there is, depending on how deep your Devy league is, you got to be really careful with those freshmen, because they're so far away from actually giving you points, on your fantasy roster. I mean, you have to sit and hold on to the guy for a minimum of 3 years.
Yeah.
And anything can happen. So I guess in that little, kind of unofficial study, the running backs had a higher hit rate. But I think to your point, the NFL game has changed so much that it's such a passing attack that, you can get really good wide receivers in like round 2 of your rookie draft. In fact, I was listening to another podcast and they were talking about New Year's resolutions. And a guy said, I will not draft these crappy running backs in the second round and pass on these wide receivers that are
so
higher
many
rated.
good ones.
Because look at all these guys that you passed on T. Higgins because you wanted Keyshawn Vaughn.
Yep.
You passed on Chase Claypool, for whatever reason. You didn't, and I was guilty of that. I was like, I didn't have the guy that highly rated. And, trust the draft stock, trust the team that drafted him. It's like, okay, that the NFL is telling you something, Skip. You need to rethink your, don't just stick to your board. It's like, maybe I should give this guy a shot in a couple leagues. Cause man, if the Steelers are taking him as early as they did, they obviously like him. So yeah, kind of remember this, come my rookie drafts this year, like, let the NFL draft kind of drive you to the right players. And if you love a guy that falls, you got to just let him fall.
Yeah, it's so true. And I remember having the feeling I have right now, like with the wide receivers, saying like, don't pass on them around 2 is the same thing. Like all last offseason, all last summer, I was like, there's such good wide receivers. Like you said, like Denzel Mims falling, T. Higgins falling. I mean, it feels hard to remember now, but Justin Jefferson didn't go early round 1 in rookie drafts. For the most part, he went late round 1 or like right at the end of round 1, like the 111, the 112, stuff like that. I remember looking at it like last June, I want to say, and Chase Claypool was going in the 3rd round of rookie drafts.
Yes.
Like he was practically free. And for, like you said, people reaching on the Keyshawn Vaughns of the world and Anthony McFarland and, just like, well, I need a running back. But it's like, I'm just going to draft the good wide receivers. And if I have too many of them, I'm content to have my spoil of riches and, trade them for a haul or, just win that way.
But yeah, and I've heard a lot of smart people just say you need to take the best players available and not worry about filling up your starting lineup in May. Yeah. Like you've got months to figure that out. I mean, that's what trading is all about in Dynasty. Just let it play out, and you can always figure that out once you get either closer to the season or even in season. We're like, okay, I've got a hole here and a hole here, and I think the rest of my team looks pretty good. Now I'm going to make a move to try and find something to fill that gap versus trying to have the perfect starting lineup in May. And you have no idea what's going to change between then and September. So yeah, it's get the best players.
Yeah. I do think as well, like we were saying, just with the depth of the wide receiver position. And I think like some of these, and I'll tie it into tight ends in a second as well, but some of the wide receivers, when they used to come out, there was so much more of that projection of like, even happened with DK Metcalf a couple of years ago where people were like, well, he only runs 1 route or he can only run 2 routes. And it's like, yeah, but he's a 1-trick pony, but it's an awesome trick. And like, if you could teach him another trick, like then look out. Right. But now it's like, at least the majority or, smart modern offenses have incorporated more of that college game where it's like, all right, we're not going to ask you to do stuff that you're bad at. Like if you can learn more stuff that you didn't do in college, great, but let's put you in a position to succeed. And that's what smart teams do. And I feel like it's a little easier to maybe project some of that with the wide receivers now, but the tight ends are a train wreck forever. Like I feel like there's no other position where it's like such a projection constantly of, I remember for the past like 2 years of being like, well, Dawson Knox is like a guy that I'm really like, banking on. And it's like, I don't have the number in front of me, but he had like, I remember a handful of catches at Ole Miss or something like that. Like he caught no touchdowns in college. It's like, you're just projecting out, well, this guy's big and athletic and he's caught some passes and hopefully he lands someplace where they let him do that a little more. But it's like for every, George Kittle, Travis Kelce, TJ Hawkinson, it's a lot of other garbage, a lot of other mess out there.
The lesson that I've learned on tight ends, because I'm a Dawson Knox guy as well. I've got him on a few rosters, and I just keep reminding myself, don't give up.
Takes long.
Let him develop. He's only played 2 years. The upside is that the system that he is in with Buffalo, they're passing the ball a lot. So the volume, at least from a passing standpoint on the offense, is there. Now it's just a matter of, is he going to get more incorporated into it? And don't give up, because I've had that on a couple of guys where I gave up too soon, and then all of a sudden, age 26, 27, they start doing good fantasy things. I'm like, man, why did I let that guy go? And that's what I've often said to Devy, people listening to our show is, be really careful how much capital on the Devy side you put into a tight end. Because I mean, like I said earlier, the hit rate is really low. And remember, it takes them even longer to do anything in the NFL. So, you draft some stud freshman tight end, like not only are you waiting the 2 years for him to go pro, but now you're going to wait likely another 2 years
at least
for him to start really producing consistency on your roster. It's like, you're going to have a guy sitting on your roster for 4 years. He's not going to do a thing.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting.
A tough pill to swallow.
Yeah. I was kind of working through that in my head too. It's like, you can't. It's just such a long time. But it's interesting now. I don't know how you feel about him, but I feel like I've reached the point where in any dynasty leagues, like, I am going to have 0 shares of any Kyle Pitts because the price has already outweighed what I'm willing to pay. Like, I feel like Kyle Pitts is going to go so early in these rookie drafts that I just am going to get stuck with none of them.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I'm in one league where, it's a tight end premium league, so I gotta think about it, because I pretty much punted year one. It was the startup last year, and I was amassing, future picks. So I've got 3 first-round picks and 4 second-rounders. And I'm thinking, all right, I have to take a quarterback at the 102, because my only good quarterback's Dak Prescott, and it's a super flex. So it's, got to go there. But I've got the 107 and the 109. And I'm like, man, am I going to take Pitts at 107? I mean, there's a lot of good players at 107. I mean, these wide receivers that are falling. I mean, every mock I'm in, Bateman's falling to the end of the first round. I'm like, guys, Rashad Bateman's really good. I'm not just a gopher homer on this. I mean, he's a great wide receiver. So
the 107 or the 108 was where I was going to draft all of the Chris Olave, all of it. And it's been robbed from me in rookie draft season. And I'm so upset.
And the worst part about Olave for me is, you would have talked to me a year ago and I'd be like, yeah, he's all right. I wasn't really that, kind of thrilled with him. And then the more I watched him, I was like, oh my God, this kid is really good. Like, I love the way he runs routes. He's got great hands. I'm like, man, this kid is awesome. And he's not getting the rankings and the hype that all these other wide receivers. I mean, granted, it's a deep class, but man, this kid's going to be a late first round, early, maybe, he could be the guy falling to the early second. He's going to be a steal.
Yeah.
And then he opts out. I'm like, now everyone's going to know about him.
Yeah, he's going so early next year now. That was what was so appealing. It was like, I felt so good about him as a player, and the cost was going to be perfect. I was like, this is that guy, like you just said, that is going to fall out of round 1 or to late round 1. And I'm going to be doing backflips the same way I was when T. Higgins fell and, all these other guys slipped last year. And now it'll be Amon-Ra. Now it'll be Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's my guy.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
he is the guy that's
the
falling.
value guy. Yeah. But we've touched on a little wide receiver, running back, tight end, quarterbacks. I feel like quarterbacks there's this conundrum of every year somebody's generational now. And I feel like it's harder and harder to that can't always be the case, right? Like, that's not what generational means. Like, there can't be one every year. Like, that's not how it works. But regarding quarterbacks and Devy, we talked about, you can't invest the capital in a tight end. It's so far out. You gotta, wait till they get drafted, and then wait at least, 2 to 3 years before they're, likely, hopefully fantasy relevant. At least the top end rookie quarterbacks, you can pretty much bank on them playing right away, but that doesn't mean they're going to be good right away, right? So how does that impact your kind of quarterback strategy? Like, are you willing to, you're going to take one of the promising young guys, that are coming out in the next year or so, or are you looking further down the pipeline with quarterbacks and trying to call your shot and get them cheap?
It always depends on the league and what's going on there. When I'm starting a league up, and if it's super flex, I've learned enough to know I don't want to go crazy with the quarterbacks early. Like some of these people will draft like 4 or 5 in a row, and I think that's just insane. It's like, man, you're passing up some good young players that I get it. They're valuable and you could trade them, but the team that you're trading with that needs a quarterback knows that you also need to fill another position. So
that you have all the quarterbacks.
Yeah, I guess, so my startup strategy is, if I were to get into a new league would be, I want to make sure I've got two good quarterbacks that I'm not going to have to really worry about it for a few years. And then I might eventually take a shot at one, in a Devy draft. In fact, I did that last year in one league where I was solid at quarterback. I think, I had Josh Allen and Russell Wilson and Tannehill on my roster. And in the last round of the Devy draft that year, I took Uyunglele as just a shot. I was like, well, I know he's 3 years out, but when he's that highly rated,
he'll never be cheaper.
Yeah, and I watched the film and I'm like, holy crap, what a cannon for an arm.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take a shot and just let him sit there, and then I can, kind of bank on him, if his career progresses the way it should. Like you said, he's gonna be a top pick, and if he's a first round pick, the nice thing is in a superflex league, those quarterbacks are gonna hold their value for a while.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're not gonna go in the, if they have a bad rookie year, it's not like they're gonna become just, we got to get rid of him now. It's like, no, he's a rookie. Let him develop. So you can afford to keep a guy like that maybe doesn't pop right away because he's a quarterback in a super flex and he was highly drafted. So, that team's going to give him every shot. I kind of laugh like, some of these people that are starting to say you should be selling Tua. It's like,
I was just going to bring this up.
And I'm like, he's barely had a chance. He's still not 100%. I mean, that was a significant injury. It's like, I think if you've got a guy in your league that has Tua and he's wanting to get out, man, you could really capitalize on that. And I've got Tua in a couple leagues and got one guy that keeps trying to trade for him. It's like, dude, I'm not giving this guy away pennies to the dime. I
mean, 100%.
No.
I'm rostering him in a couple of places too, and there's no chance I would sell cheap on Tua. No chance at all. Just because I know that right now there's all the rumblings about, Deshaun Watson wanting out of Houston and maybe he ends up in Miami, even though as a Jets fan, he'll probably end up on the Jets because we're speaking that into existence now. That's what,
wish it and it'll happen.
Yeah, exactly. But I just, honestly, I don't see Miami doing it. I know that it's fun and it makes sense on paper, but I just don't understand why it's like throw Tua away and trade Houston back the pick that they traded you for Laramie Tunsil. I just, build around Tua. I don't think it's way too fast for me to write off Tua. And it feels like, I hope that doesn't become a thing. After the quick pull on Rosen and the Cards drafting Kyler Murray, I hope that doesn't become a thing every year now where it's like, oh, well, you could just move on from a quarterback. But because I don't see it. And I still believe in Tua, and it would, especially in Superflex, I'm not selling him cheap. If you want to come get him, it's going to cost you because he was an early draft pick that I still think is going to get opportunities. And even if for some reason he didn't get opportunities there in Miami, he's certainly getting them someplace else. Even if he did get traded to Houston, okay, he's the guy in Houston now. So,
for sure.
I'm not trading him cheap at all.
And he's on a young, rebuilding team that, everything is heading in the right direction for Miami. I mean, if you're a Dolphins fan, you got to be loving the way this season went and how things are progressing. You got all this draft capital to put the weapons around them. It's like, yeah, they're going to find somebody, they're going to spend a high draft pick on a wide receiver and help him out. I mean, Devontae Parker is solid. I'm still a believer in Preston Williams, and I like Gesicki. So it's like the cupboard isn't bare, but man, you add one stud receiver to that grouping, and all of a sudden, the whole field can open up, and it's like this guy could just absolutely be the player he was at Alabama. And yeah, it's way too early to give up on a guy like that.
It'll be interesting, if they don't make any crazy move and stick at 3 and I know it's high, but do you take one of the wide receivers there if you're Miami, whether it's Jamar Chase or one of the Alabama kids, and put them back with Tua? But I don't know. I agree. I think one big legitimate wide receiver weapon changes the complexion of that offense a pretty good amount. Because I also don't think Myles Gaskin is just like a complete throwaway player. Like, he looked pretty good, and they treated him like a featured back when he was out there. Like, he was getting double-digit touches on a regular basis. So I don't think they're going to be in a rush to replace him. I think the move should be, a top-tier talent at wide receiver. Jalen Waddle would be fun in that offense.
Yes.
He really would be fun in that offense.
And I agree with you on Gaskin. I think Miami's going to be a popular place for mock drafts to put a running back in.
Yeah, I agree.
Fairly early. I could see them holding off and late day 2, maybe early day 3. Get one of these other running backs that are in that big pool of tier 2 or 3 guys, and just say, you know what, we've got a couple guys that are already pretty good. We're going to add a third guy to the mix. And we just know that between these 3 guys, we're going to be set, and they'll all do different things. And, the running back by committee, that obviously as a fantasy player, it's not the greatest, but as a team running, their offense, it makes total sense. I mean, you don't want to be dependent on one guy. You want to stay healthy. I mean, I could very much see them, do that, and, who knows who's going to fall, but they'll find somebody to fit in, because there's a lot of running backs, later on that I think you can get for value.
Yeah, I just don't think with the surplus, even with the surplus of early draft capital that they have, I just can't see them with the production that they got out of Gaskin and can get out of like a day 3 guy or a late day 2 guy. They can easily spend that early capital someplace else, whether it's adding more O-line, they got to add an early wide receiver. It really feels like they have to, whether it's an early draft pick or they spend big in free agency. They got to do something to put a real weapon on the outside there. But I don't know. I don't think they're throwing away Gaskin. I think he's hanging around, and like you said, maybe they add somebody else late. But this is a long answer to don't sell cheap on Tua. Is the moral of the story.
And thank you for Locked On Miami Dolphins.
Well, Skip, I appreciate you getting on with me tonight. Do you have any last parting shots that you want to throw out there for anybody, or whether it's Devy advice, dynasty advice, anything that you want to get out there?
Yeah, when it comes to Devy, I did say earlier, you don't want to overvalue those players, because you don't know, how they're going to do, and the hit rate is a lot less. But that said, I'm not a proponent of people that just sell all their Devy picks to try and win now. I mean, unless you get an offer you can't refuse. I mean, those Devy picks are your farm system to continuously, replenish your roster with talent. And you want to make sure that you have those there. I did a startup a couple of years ago where I was able to trade back like a couple times in the startup draft or the rookie draft and amass a couple more Devy picks. And it was great, because, it's like, you get into even the second round, it's like, okay, now it's whatever people happen to like or what they're looking for, because there's so many players to choose from that, keep those picks, and you're not gonna go wrong with that. And if you get a player that you really like I had Breece Hall on my team, and a guy needed a quarterback and started talking about Tannehill, and he was dangling Tyreek Hill, and I ended up moving Tannehill and Breece Hall and like a 3rd round Devy pick for Tyreek Hill. I'm like, there you go.
Yeah,
because I had those assets, I was able to acquire, one of the best wide receivers in the game, who's still young enough where he's going to be on my team for 4 or 5 years. And I think that's my big recommendation, is that, don't panic. You get, if you're going to play Devy, you got to be patient, and, just let the guys develop, and do your research, or find someone, some people you trust, and let them help you. Because the thing that I've learned is the Devy community is awesome, and people love talking about these prospects, on Twitter. So, reach out, and you're going to get a response, and then those guys are going to tag other people that are going to chime in, and it's like we're like this little subset of the bigger fantasy football industry. So it's a lot of fun, because you just start seeing the same people, commenting and giving their opinions on these players. And it's a great community to be a part of.
For sure, man. I think it's great advice. And like I said, I appreciate you coming on, and we'll do it again because I think, like we said at the beginning, it's only going to get bigger. I think we're only going to see more people playing Devy, shifting towards Devy. It's just the logical progression, I think, from the rest of the Dynasty kind of community and the way people have transitioned over the years. It's just logical for people to want more and play a more kind of intense or in-depth format. So I'm sure that we'll be able to do this again and link up again and put some more fun stuff out there. But I appreciate you working through the Zoom technical difficulties that we had, and we made it work. But I appreciate it, and I'm a big fan of your work, and I look forward to reading more and doing more podcasts with you over the next couple coming months and years.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was great being on, and hopefully people found this useful. And yeah, I'm a big fan of yours too. Love the article you just put out on the Devy players to watch. And as soon as I read that, it's like, oh, I'm totally doing this for the ACC. Like, this is the next article I'm writing. That's not all these rookie profiles we're working on. So
that one was a fun one. As much as we just said that's perfect. Be patient, because I was like, oh man, there's so many fun freshmen.
Yes.
All right, buddy. Well, I appreciate it. I won't keep you tied up, but I appreciate you taking some time out of your night and hopping on with me, and we'll do it again soon.
Sounds good. Anytime, man.
Thanks, man. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too.
Later. Thanks again to Skip for joining me to go over some of his tips and thoughts for fantasy players looking to get into playing Devy for the first time around. Like we had mentioned, I think it's a logical progression for a lot of players that have gone the route of loving playing redraft, looking out for keeper leagues, eventually leaning or going the route of playing Dynasty, and then Devy's just kind of the next logical step in that progression. So I appreciate Skip taking the time. Make sure to follow all of his work. Make sure to check out the Devy Happy Hour. It's a great podcast. They go over a lot of great stuff, and I appreciate him taking the time. And I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to the podcast. Check it out on YouTube. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you could, subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. Leave a review, rate 5 stars. That stuff goes a long way. Very easy to do, and it helps me out and helps the show out. So I appreciate that. Next week, we'll get right back into breaking down some of the incoming rookies. So going to talk about quarterbacks next week. Some fun guys to talk about. Obviously, some that we already have talked about a lot for the last couple of years, but we're going to talk about them anyway because there's a lot of fun stuff to get into with a lot of those guys at the top. So appreciate all the support. Appreciate you checking out the show, and we'll be back next week. Thanks.